Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Halo Chronicle. Today's episode is part 14 in my First Strike series. A link to the other parts in this series will be provided in the description below. In the previous episode, we recounted some of the events that took place during the fall of Reach from the perspective of Frederick 104. Frederick led 22 Spartans to the surface of Reach to defend its orbital MAC gun generators. While en route to the surface, their Pelican was damaged by Covenant Seraph fighters. This forced the Spartans to bail out at a suicidal height. The resulting fall caused the deaths of 4 Spartans and left several more injured. Fred then reorganized his forces into 4 teams and assigned tasks. One team would defend the orbital generator complex, one team would go to rescue Admiral Whitcomb and his team, one team would set up a defense at Castle Base, and Fred's team would lead an offensive against the Covenant. Fred's team would take on 10,000 Covenant soldiers that were amassing on the other side of a hill near the generator complex. To take out these forces, Fred's team would attempt to throw a Havoc tactical nuclear grenade into the gravity lift of a Covenant ship hovering above the amassing army. To do this, the Spartans would commandeer 3 Banshees. Fred's offensive was ultimately successful, and the Covenant ship explosion took out 10,000 Covenant troops, but the celebration would be short-lived. 4 more Covenant cruisers would enter the area and send troops to attack the orbital generator complex. This forced the Spartans to fall back to Castle Base. We then move back to the present timeline, where the Master Chief and Cortana were drifting through Alpha Halo's debris field. While attempting to find a ride out of the system, Cortana would detect the presence of a Covenant fleet. She would also detect several cryopods floating in orbit. The Chief would attempt to recover the pods and bring them into his ship, but before he could do so, a Covenant ship would move into the area and begin searching for survivors. The Covenant ship would then move on an intercept course towards the Chief's ship, but before it could get there, it would be fired upon by a UNSC Pelican. The Chief quickly loaded the pods into his ship and returned to the Longsword's cockpit. The 2 UNSC ships then would begin to try and outrun the Covenant vessel. While attempting to outrun the Covenant, the Master Chief ordered that the Pelican dock with his longsword. The Chief would then open a hatch connected to the Pelican and attempt to retrieve the UNSC personnel inside. The first person he would pull aboard was a UNSC sergeant that the Chief believed had succumbed to the flood. His name was Sergeant Avery Johnson. That completes last week's recap. Let's jump into today's video. The Master Chief would angrily interrogate Sergeant Avery Johnson, who he thought had died. Sergeant Johnson recounted the events of his surprising survival and escape from Alpha Halo. He stated that when the flood attacked him, something about him actually repelled the parasite, but he had no idea what it could be. This gave him an opening to escape. Chief did not believe this was possible and ordered Cortana to scan the sergeant head to toe. Cortana found no evidence of flood contamination and was able to confirm that Johnson was not infected. The Master Chief returned the sergeant's pistol to him and reopened the hatch to the Pelican. 3 more UNSC personnel would join the Chief and Johnson on the Longsword. The first was Warrant Officer Sheila Pulaski, followed by ODST Corporal Locklear and ONI Lieutenant Haverson. Together they would need to formulate a plan to escape the Covenant and get out of Halo's debris field. The Master Chief would assume tactical command of this operation. Chief would come up with a daring plan. The Longsword was equipped with a space mine system. He ordered his team to load up the Pelican with all of the mines. They then sealed the hatch and detached the Pelican. The Pelican would then be remote piloted by Cortana and sent on an intercept course with the Covenant flagship vessel in the system. The Longsword would also begin to take a course to the flagship. As the Pelican approached, Covenant Seraph fighters would leave the flagship and make a beeline for the UNSC ships. As they approached the Pelican, Chief had Cortana release and set off the space mines. The mines cleared a path. Cortana then pushed the Pelican into the flagship vessel's shields where it exploded. The explosion gave the Chief and his team an entry point through the vessel's shields. Pulaski piloted and guided the longsword through the hole at a high rate of speed. The longsword would crash into the docking bay of the Covenant flagship known as the Ascendant Justice. The Master Chief and his team would gather their weapons and clear the docking bay of hostile Covenant forces. They would then begin to move through the ship. To make things easier, Cortana found a maintenance hatchway designed for Covenant engineers. The Chief and his team were able to use this maintenance tube to traverse the large ship. Cortana even found a data port that would allow her access to the ship's systems. She would then guide the team through the maintenance tubes while in the ship's systems. During one of the previous firefights on the ship, the Master Chief's energy shield generator was damaged and would no longer function. This meant that he would be forced to move through a ship completely filled with enemies without his protective shields. The ragtag team would reach the ship's bridge. They launched a coordinated strike on the bridge crew through the maintenance shaft. They were able to eliminate all but one Covenant elite. The Chief would be forced to grapple with this elite as he ran out of ammo. The elite would pull out an energy sword and attempt to use it on the Chief. The Chief would be forced to attempt to wrestle the sword away, but he would struggle significantly due to the amount of fatigue he was feeling. Finally, after a lengthy battle, some of the others were able to hit the elite with plasma pistol fire, which gave the Chief the distraction he needed to kick the elite into a lifeboat bay. Cortana then sealed and ejected the elite into space. The Master Chief and his crew would assume control of the Ascendant Justice. While in the ship's systems, Cortana detected the presence of another artificial intelligence. This was the UNSC's first contact with a Covenant artificial intelligence. She attempted to track this rogue AI, but was unable to do so. During this time, Cortana would experience performance issues due to the amount of data she recovered from Alpha Halo. These performance issues hindered her from operating at full capacity. In order to take control of the ship's navigation, the Master Chief was instructed to activate an override panel. Unfortunately for the UNSC forces, this panel was a trap. The rogue AI created code that camouflaged the panel. This caused Cortana to have the Chief activate a panel that actually disconnected the ship's slipspace drive. In order to restore the slipspace generator, the Chief would have to move to the engine room and reconnect it manually. The timing of this ordeal could not have been worse, as other Covenant ships in the system were alerted by the rogue AI that the Ascendant Justice had been captured. The fleet would then begin firing plasma torpedoes at their own flagship in response. To reattach the slipspace drive, the Master Chief would have to bring a Covenant engineer with him to the ship's engine room. Fortunately, this ship was full of engineers. The Chief would make his way to the engine room while Cortana performed a series of evasive maneuvers to dodge plasma fire. She moved the ship into Threshold's gravity well in an effort to throw off the trailing plasma bolts. The Chief and his new engineer friend cleared the engine room and began to work on the repair. The slipspace drive was reconnected, but Cortana believed it was too late. She believed that the ship got too close to Threshold and would be pulled into the gas giant. The Chief asked her to try and perform the slipspace jump anyway. To her amazement, the Covenant ship was far more advanced than Cortana predicted. After several minutes of intense navigation, Cortana was able to jump the Ascendant Justice into slipspace while in the atmosphere of Threshold. This was the first time in history that UNSC forces were able to perform a slipspace jump while in atmosphere. The crew regrouped on the ship's bridge to discuss their next plan. The Master Chief wanted to proceed with Operation Red Flag. That mission would see the Chief take this ship to the Covenant's homeworld and capture a Prophet. Lieutenant Haverson stated that they should return to human-controlled space. He believed that if humanity were given access to the ship, they could reverse engineer it and develop new technologies that could win the war. Begrudgingly, the Chief agreed and handed over command to Haverson. Before returning to human-controlled space, the crew would need to honor the Cole Protocol. To do this, they would need to travel to a random point in space before heading home. They also had to make sure that the Covenant could not track this ship, which they did not have the tools to do. The Chief would then make a bold suggestion. He would suggest that they return to Reach. He believed that they could find a UNSC ship and the wreckage that could take them home safely, but he also had other motives. The Chief wanted to make sure his Spartans were truly gone. If they were alive, he wanted to do everything in his power to save them. Haverson agreed with the Master Chief's plan and ordered Cortana to take the ship to Reach. That will conclude this part of the story, but before I wrap things up, let's talk about some interesting bits of lore tied to today's video. After taking the Ascendant Justice into slipspace, Cortana ordered a Covenant engineer to repair the Master Chief's energy shields. Even though the process made him very uncomfortable, the Chief allowed the engineer to access his Mjolnir suit's power supply. The engineer was able to repair and reactivate the Master Chief's energy shielding. After the Chief left the bridge, Haverson killed the engineer to keep the UNSC shielding tech from possibly falling back into Covenant hands. While in slipspace, the Master Chief would send Sergeant Johnson to the docking bay to retrieve supplies from the Pelican. While there, Johnson was able to take a look at the cryopods the Chief recovered, and he found that one of them contained another Spartan. This Spartan was Linda. Linda was ambushed by Covenant forces with the Chief when they attempted to destroy some navigational data during the fall of Reach. She was clinically dead, but the Chief believed that there was still hope to resuscitate her if she was given the proper medical care. Contrary to popular belief, Reach was not completely glassed after its fall like other human planets. In fact, only Reach's north and south poles were glassed. After Reach's fall, the Covenant would begin searching for Forerunner relics, and they occupied the planet for quite some time. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Next week's episode will detail the defense of Castle Base and the return of one of the most infamous characters in the Halo universe, Dr. Catherine Halsey. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.